So I discovered what I see now as a common characteristic of all of the way the chart works that I'm just going to point out because it's now built into my current version. I make different charts every year, always trying to get why there are these three aspects and why there are these three ways of talking about these three aspects. The bottom one I'm not going to talk about. Dasein's essence, that isn't really part of the chart. It's just another one of the threefold. It's the chart at the top, the three things at the top which interest me a lot. What I think is true now and illuminating is that he always has, for each of the three, this most primordial level, which is the most sort of abstract structural characteristic that he's trying to get at. And then that's always experienced as some particular mode of experience. I better turn this down a little bit. How do I do it, Dave? Here, I think. I just tried one. It worked, I think. Hello? Yeah, I think it worked. Okay, so in each of them, there is then experienced in a general sort of way. That is thrownness in disposedness. And disposedness could be other than moods, but the most obvious and prominent mode of disposedness, I think emotions might be another kind of disposedness. It's all the receptivity experiences. You could try to figure out for yourself what they might be. For instance, love isn't a mood, but love probably almost surely comes under disposedness and thrownness. And now you can do it across all three. Go over to the other side because we've already been there. Projection. Well, we know that that's kind of primordial understanding, and that's that's the basic. What do I mean by primordial understanding? Well, I see. Well, it's the way Dasein takes a stand on its being, I think. No, I don't know what I mean by that. That's a problem. Well, it's yes, but I don't know what the phenomena is. I mean, I know that what the phenomena of disposedness is. The phenomena of understanding is something. I don't know what, which maybe we'll figure it out. But then it becomes concrete in. That's the nice third one, where the main thing is its primary understanding, and that's pressing into possibilities. That's responding to affordances. But there ought to be a more general notion of understanding, like disposedness, of which that's the main case. But what other cases would there be of understanding? I don't know. Then when you make charts, it's always helpful because then you discover boxes with things in them in the chart that you don't know what the phenomena is. And I have to think hard about that one. But the middle one, which is going to become next week's, but I'll tell you now because the discourse chapter is so confusing. But one, I made progress because in office hours, I was finally, with the help of a student, pushed it together. We managed to, I think, define discourse, which I've never been sure what it is, and I don't even know if I got it right. But I think I got it here written with this asterisk. Discourse is that means, for Heidegger, letting be seen, and it's a way that the background practices organize what shows up for us and how it shows up for us. Something like that is what's going on. And then it's experienced as articulation. I'll explain that next time. And it's made concrete in talk. The word that gets translated discourse is really the simple German word Rede for talk. And so there's lots of problems there. I sort of think I do know how to sort those out, but I'm not going to do it now. But I just want to give you some help as you go through trying to read this. Because discourse is sort of like language, but it's more basic than language, but it can be put into words. And that's what I'm trying to capture in that part of the chart. Now, I think that's it for the handout. I see I have my work cut out for me to understand what understanding means at the level of the most general description of the phenomenon. and of which we have paradigm cases, but I don't know what the general description is. Well, I'm not going to stop to find out. I'm going to go on to where we were, which is enough of a problem. A student came up after class and gave me a hardball to deal with, and it's sort of staring you in the face, and I have to deal with it. That is, on 190, we're now back in the midst of all that, which I'm sorry that it takes so long to sort it out, and everybody was looking sort of phased out last time. I hope I will only could help you get clear about it and not spend too long on it. But the beginning of that paragraph, well, I haven't done it. Let's see. Wireless mic. That. Okay, let's see. If you stop hearing me, raise your hand and I'll turn some other knob. But on 190, beginning of the first full paragraph, the very bottom of 149 in the German. But if we never perceive equipment that is ready to hand without already understanding and interpreting it, and so forth and so forth. But I thought, you want to say, but I thought that we do perceive equipment in its readiness to hand when we transparently deal with it and it withdraws. Why does he say without already understanding and interpreting it? That seems to just undermine everything I said last time. But it doesn't. It opens up a whole new, very interesting aspect of the phenomena that I didn't pay attention to. First, this nice student told me, well, maybe, and he was trying to get it out of what I said already, maybe that's how it looks to the outside person, but not to the actual perceiver. Then remember I said that as the actual perceiver just responds to the solicitation of the two go out, the person watching says they're taking the door as a door. But that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is something much more interesting and important. And I'll just blurt it out again, and then I'll try to explain it. The interesting thing is that the affordances or the solicitations that we respond to have already got significance built into them. The to go out isn't just any old to go out. It's to go out to a floor, which is something to walk on, to get to something maybe to eat, and it's all part of a referential totality. And so, in the actual experience of responding to the affordance, you don't have an experience of something as something, if that means noticing the door as a door, but in a certain way, significance and interpretation are already, and I think this is the crucial phrase, in the background that permeates what it is to respond to a solicitation. That's, or another way to put it is familiarity is always there. As you find your way around the room and go through the door without noticing the latch and sit in the benches without noticing the benches unless they're pointed in the wrong direction or something, all the phenomena we talked about last time. Well, all that's familiarity, and familiarity already includes benches as benches and doors as doors, and it's not enough to say, well, that's how they look from the outside. That somehow has got to permeate your experience to make sense of soliciting you to sit in the chairs and not on the wall or the ceiling and so forth. That's in there already. Well, now I'll read quotes that seem to me to say this. It's as if, here's another paradoxical way to put the problem. Absurd dealing is essentially as free, as hyphen free. That is, you don't see something as something, or take something as something if you're just in the flow, yet there is no as free seeing. That's true too. Somehow, in your experience of not noticing something as something, the experience already happens because you've been brought up in a culture in which you have that familiarity and which that something as something can solicit you. I'm pretty sure that's the point, and it's very hard. So let me read what I wrote. We always understand significance and familiarity in the sense that the solicitations already have a for-what structure, and so only occur on the background of significance and familiarity. Now, I owe you quotes to say that this is what's going on. On 187, at the bottom. I'll read that bottom little paragraph, the middle of the 147 in German. The disclosedness of the there in understanding is itself a way of Dasein's ability to be, in the way in which its being is projected both upon the for the sake of which and upon significance, the world. There lies the disclosedness of being. That's already got what I want to say in it. So when it's acting at the most basic level of understanding, it's already responding to, taking account of, or something, having in the background, I don't know how to put it very well, the significance of the world. And then he says, understanding of being has already been taken for granted in projecting upon possibilities. In projection, being is understood, though not ontologically conceived. That's just the most abstract way of saying that. You remember, understanding of being is very close to familiarity, as when we got way back when we were talking about that. And this is a way of saying that in the background is familiarity, even though you don't notice it, and certainly you don't make ontology out of it. That is, you don't explicitly thematize it to talk the jargon. And now on 189, there's more of it. So I'm going to read 3 more quotes. The sort of below the middle, where he's been talking about how everything ready to hand is already for such and such a purpose. Now I'm going to read something. Let me see what. Now skipping down more. That which is disclosed in understanding, a little below the middle of the line. That which is disclosed in understanding, that which is understood, is already accessible in such a way that its as which can be made to stand out explicitly. Now we know that. That's good. That's the move from understanding to interpretation. The as makes up the structure of the explicitness of something that is understood. It constitutes the interpretation. In dealing with what is environmentally ready to hand by interpreting it, we see it as a table, as a door, and so forth. Now that's right. But now we have to also explain how, even when we're not interpreting it, that is, paying attention, making explicit the door as the two go out, we're still somehow, it's already in our coping. Now I'm going to try to read you the quotes that say that. Let's just keep going. So in dealing with what's environmental ready hand, so and so, as a door, as a bridge, that what we have thus interpreted need not, and now comes the other side, necessarily be taken apart by making an assertion which definitely characterizes it. Any mere pre-predicative seeing of the ready to hand is in itself something that already understands and interprets. You see, that's just like that mysterious sentence that I'm trying to explain about how it's already got understanding and interpreting back in the middle of 190. That was the summary, that mysterious sentence, of this mysterious paragraph. So it's something that already understands and interprets. And now, let's go on. But does not the absence of such an as make up the mereness of any pure perception of something? We'll get back to that. Just ignore that for the time being. Whenever we see with this kind of sight, which is coping, we already do so understandingly and interpretively. In the mere encountering of something, it is understood in terms of a totality. This is my punchline. In the mere encountering of something, that's just going through the two go out, it is understood in terms of a totality of involvements. That means your coping with the solicitation has already built into it that it's to go out in order to so and so and so and so. So the mere encountering of something, it is understood in terms of a totality of involvements, and as such hides in itself, this is the funny phrase, but you can see Heidegger's got an impossible job here. It's so hard to get the phenomena right. So it hides in itself the explicitness of the assignment relations of the in order to, which belong to the totality. That funny thing of it hides in itself is what I'm trying to grasp by saying it wouldn't be the kind of solicitation it was if you weren't already socialized in the familiarity with rooms and doors and so forth. In that sense, it hides the going out the door as a door, even though it isn't thinking about it, and it isn't even playing any of that kind of noticing, thinking kind of role, but the as structure is structuring your responses in the background, even though you're not having any as structure experience. And everybody, I'll get you all unhappy again. I can see it now, but we've got to try to figure this out. So I'm still on 189, but we're almost finished. Then you can start thinking again. So I've done that. So even when I'm not taking something as something, there is, and that's on 190. Where does he say that? We're back to that. Even if we never perceive equipment that is ready to hand without already understanding and interpreting. Wait a moment. Even if we're not taking something as something. Whoa. Well, I don't have a quote for that. That's all right. We know that. Okay, that's all right. Even when we're not taking something as something, there is still no free seeing. There is never free seeing because the as is built into the structure of the world. That's on 191. And at the very top, or the very bottom of 190. When something within the world is encountered as such, and this isn't a big as such, encountered as such, that is encountered as within the world, the thing in question already has an involvement, which is disclosed in our understanding of the world, and this involvement is one that gets laid out in interpretation. Now, in other words, it already has an involvement in the sense, I just repeated myself, that it's taking up the whole referential totality in terms of some particular activity. It's acting on the basis of familiarity. But what amazes me is I haven't come to the quote that is my favorite, where he actually says it's the background. Where? Let's see. Is it the next sentence? What page was I on? 191. It should be right around here somewhere. Ah, you're right. Exactly the next, at the top of 191. The ready to hand is always understood in terms of a totality of involvements. This totality need not be grasped explicitly by a thematic interpretation. That's good. Even if it has undergone such an interpretation, it recedes into an understanding which does not stand out from the background. And this is the very mode on which it is the essential foundation of everyday circumspective interpretation. So, everyday circumspective interpretation where you notice something, like going out the door as a door because something sticks or the doorknob doesn't work or something, all that kind of interpretation, which doesn't have to be breakdowns, it can be improving. He gives a whole list right here. Where is that list? Soon around here. Eugene probably knows where it is. That list of all the things that you could be doing with it. Anyway, all that other stuff can let's do the doorknob. The doorknob, if it's got a problem, can get your attention, and you can see it explicitly as a doorknob, and it has an as having the function for opening doors. But once it gets working again, it goes back into the background and just becomes the solicitation to go out, and you don't have to notice it at all as a doorknob anymore. It just fits into the thing. You got the quote? Oh, that's all right. We don't really need it. So 191, and that's it. Finally. I'm not going to talk about this anymore. Anybody who wants to can come and tell me how unhappy they are in office hours and that I got it wrong, or write a paper on it. I'm going to go on. I just sum up again. I've added one thing new to last time. It isn't just that the as structure is always there in the world and goes down to the bottom of the way the world is, which is what I said last time, and that you see that when you look at the world from outside, but you don't see it when you're in it. Now, I've added something else. But you do have that. You take that up as background whenever you act at all in it. So it isn't. So in a certain way, the as structure is already there, and in another way, the as structure isn't there. And Heidegger doesn't know what to say about it, and neither do I. But the important thing is, remember the phenomenon. And I think Heidegger's got his eye on the phenomenon. I think I've got my eye on Heidegger on the phenomenon. And with that, we're going on. Okay. something new now. It was already in the background, never mind background, it was already there in some of the quotes, but I sort of shoved it aside, and that is, there is the whole interesting thesis that it isn't as if there's a meaningless brute facts out there which we give meaning to. That's what Husserl thinks. Husserl says, I would bring in the quote, but none of you care, but Husserl says that we have to give cultural predicates to the bare given objects, and he says, for instance, in using a hammer. I like that quote because Husserl has been trying to understand being in time and to interpret it, and he did read it twice, and he made a lot of marginal comments showing that he didn't really understand it very well, but he knew it was against him. Anyway, but the point is, Husserl, and guess what? John Searle, who always seems to me to be channeling Husserl, says the same thing. And how many have had the social reality courses? Not very many. But we take brute facts and we give them a meaning. The famous Searle example, I'll do the Searle demo if I have any money, any bills. Okay, you've got a bill. As a brute fact, it's just a piece of cellulose with ink stains on it, and it has no meaning at all. But we take it as money, and as long as everybody in their collective intentionality takes it as money, it functions as money, and that means that we lay a function or a meaning on the bare facts. And Heidegger's just going to deny that. He's going to say that, what would you expect him to say? Well, one way to say what you could expect him to say is that Searle doesn't have, and Husserl, a view of the world. And they're talking about the universe, and the universe is made up of bare, meaningless facts, electrons and galaxies and stuff like that. And normally you don't even give the meaning. You're just not in the business of dealing with the universe unless you're in a science course. But the world is meaningful all the way down and all the way back. It's always already structured in terms of significance. There's no place for individual Daseins or even the whole culture to confront the meaningless brute given that science deals with and give it a meaning. And you might then wonder, well, how in the world, where did this meaning come from? I'll come back to that before we finish the meaning. But it starts already, this issue, on page 190, in that little piece that I skipped, but the bottom of 190, top of 150 in German. In interpreting, we do not, so to speak, throw a signification over some naked thing which is present at hand. We do not stick a value on it. Function predicate is Searle's name for the value. I don't remember what Husserl calls it. But when something within the world encounters such, the thing in question already has an involvement, that is, it's already for hammering or for going out, and that's disclosed in our understanding. Now that's an important move. That separates Heidegger from, I think, everybody except Aristotle. That's why he likes to go back to Aristotle. And he says Aristotle was the last philosopher who could just describe the way the world ordinarily showed up. And they kept on describing it the way Aristotle did until Descartes came along and smashed that. And Heidegger's got to get back to the understanding of the world, which Aristotle had. He wasn't sort of corrupted by having Galileo around or things getting worse by having Newton around. There's nothing wrong with Galileo and Newton. There's nothing wrong with the bare world that they describe. It's much better than the world of Aristotle, the physics of Aristotle, which tries to read meaning into nature. It looks like we made a lot of progress, as far as can be seen, by getting rid of all the predicates like the rocks seek their natural place and so forth, and not getting rid of them for our ordinary experience of the world, in fact, for appreciating them. That's what Heidegger thinks Aristotle did and what Heidegger is doing. But they shouldn't be, it looks like science works better when you don't think of a projectile seeking their natural place. You think of inertia and so forth. But I'm not going to go, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the fact, the way Heidegger tries to get you to stop thinking in this way that what we first encounter is the brute-given stuff, like, well, to take a Searle example, because if you try to describe this, it's tricky. Searle's good at it. But, I mean, you can't say if you take a door as a brute-given something and then you attribute doorness or the point for going in and out to it. So how am I going to describe the door? Well, I'm not good at this, but some vertical slab of wood that turns or something, you take that, try to make it as bare as you can, and then you add that it's functioning as a door. Searle's great example, which I'm going to say more about, is when he talks about the noises that come out of people's mouths. But that's not quite good enough yet, because there are mouths in there and noises. Then he says, an orifice opens up and an acoustic blast comes out. That's neat. What he's trying to do is describe the bare particular, and then he says, and we, with our intentionality, individual and collective, give meaning to this acoustic blast. But when you see if you sort of take away Dasein, well, that's not Searle way of talking. If you take away collective intentionality, there would just be this noise. And what is Heidegger going to say in response to that? Well, something like, we never experience orifices and faces opening up and noise coming out. We are always already in a world from the moment we are born, or really before we're born. I'll tell you about that in a minute. We're already in a world of meaning. And but our meaning is sort of crude when we're not even born yet. But we get better and better at it. In Wittgenstein jargon, light dawns gradually over the whole. But we're inside this whole from the start. That is, try to think of it this way, that if it isn't as if at the start a subject which is self-contained and intelligible to itself confronts the brute fact and gives it a meaning. As you get socialized, a world of equipment gradually gets clear to you, or more and more clear to you, and you get to be more and more an active user and knower. It's just bad everything, bad phenomenology, and even bad developmental psychology if you think that at any moment the child, and Searle does say this, I think he shouldn't have, it would be better if he hadn't, that the child takes this acoustic blast and gives it a meaning. And now, just to get a feel for this, I mean, Heidegger doesn't need this little fact, but it helps. That it turns out that fetuses, even in the womb, respond selectively to the mother's voice. How in the world they interview the fetus in the womb and find out about that, I have no idea. But in fact, I believe them. So anyway, and that's, in other words, the baby is hardly evolved into certainly not a Dasein. It won't be a Dasein until it's, I don't know, at least a few months old and has equipment and language and being with, that already this little animal, like something or other, has gotten itself into a world of making discriminations that, on the basis of something significant to it. And, yeah, go ahead. I'm happy. I've been talking too long. What do you want to say?
Incorporate about something the world as a technology when you pick up your meaning in a sensitive way. The quotes on 167.
Oh, no, you take up your world in an authentic way. I'll go look at it, but I can already answer what it has to be. Not everybody takes up their world in an authentic way. That's division 2. That you have to come back next semester to find out what that is. Most people never do it. That is, can I say anything to give you a clue? Not really. It's a little complicated. But anyway, but everybody takes up the world mostly in an inauthentic way, meaning that they don't really. Heidegger has a sense. Well, I'll throw it in just to show you where things happen. kind of things he brings into Division 2. Aristotle, he says, knows that practical wisdom, phronesis, consists in responding to the unique situation. And that's because the phronimos is in certain sense authentic. That's not Aristotle talk. But most people never respond to the unique situation. They always do what one does. We're back to the way the one, covers up everything, levels it, banalizes it. The price of intelligibility is general, banal, standard ways of pronouncing things and of eating and of reading and thinking and sending Christmas cards and so forth. All of that, and getting pumpkins. I was the Berkeley Bowl, and I was just appalled at the number of pumpkins. I mean, why can't people think of something else, anything else? I mean, that just, people are so conventional. Anyway, that's it. People are conventional, and that means inauthentic. And that means they don't take up the world in an authentic way, but they understand that pumpkins are for making jack-o'-lanterns, and that everybody does that. And that's already intelligibility. So I don't see any problem. I mean, now I'll look at the passage. Tell me where it is. And now okay, let's look. I don't see it yet. Oh yeah, if Dasein discovers the world in its own way, that's authentic, and brings it close, that would be responding to the unique situation. Maybe they, bring home fancy corn or something, although that will soon become what everybody does. And brings it close. If it discloses to itself its own authentic being, all this is Division 2, then this discovery of the world and this disclosure of Dasein are always accomplished by a clearing away of concealments and obscurities, those are the banalities, as a breaking up of the disguises with which Dasein bars its own way. Yeah, that's just what I explained. You grow up, so once you come out of the womb and you get better discriminations, you just don't discriminate only your mother's voice, but you begin to see that maybe she's saying something, and gradually you discover that your language is English, and bit by bit light is dawning over the whole. But it's all a very general kind of light, that you just do what your family does, and only when you later, because of anxiety, which I'm putting off till Division 2, break out of doing what the banal thing one does, then you get to understand the world in a fresh way. Heidegger's always got, and it gets clearer in later Heidegger, an interest in the fact that the Greeks could experience things in wonder. And wonder is what gets covered up when you know already exactly what trees are and what people are and what animals are and what they're for and what situations you do what, and you just have really good at the standard way of doing things, then you've got no wonder. And later, Heidegger really worries how to preserve it in this culture. That's not in Division 2. I don't want to give you false advertising. That's in later Heidegger, and someday I'm going to teach that, but I haven't figured out when. Okay, anyway, I've answered you. You don't look answered, but you have it. You just don't know it. Go ahead. Yes. We can. Yes. You see, yes. What's that? Well, no, Husserl doesn't think we discover it. He thinks we give the world meaning. We don't go around discovering hammers in Searle and Husserl. We go around interpreting them by giving them a function. And Descartes, in this book, just go back to the Descartes section. Remember, there they were called goods, but I call them value predicates. Descartes, it's all already in Descartes. Husserl's just saying this in his book Cartesian Meditations. He was happy to be a Cartesian. Probably the last person who was happy. No, Searle is still happy. No, Searle doesn't want to be a Cartesian, but he is anyway. Because it depends on how you understand Descartes. If you say, well, Descartes thought that there was a soul and it was separate from the body and it was immortal and all that, then of course, there is neither Searle nor, Husserl wants to be a Cartesian. But if the Cartesian is the ontology, that's what Heidegger would say, in which there is a self-sufficient subject as the source of meaning with intentional content in it, and the world of brute facts which have no meaning, and those they meet, so to speak, haven't influenced each other, and then they get together and you get this kind of world. That's what Heidegger's trying to say is just wrong. It's just bad phenomenology. It's only, and he says another interesting thing. I have to find the passages. I've been talking without looking, but I'll say it first. He very interestingly says you have to do a very special amount of training to see the brute given of a door, or try to see people's mouths as orifices, and try to hear the noises coming out of my mouth as an acoustic blast. It's very hard, and painters spent a lot of trouble learning how. Cézanne, it was a life work of Cézanne to be able to paint what he was actually seeing and not already meaningful. In fact, never mind Cézanne. That's a very bad example. But if any painter who wants to try to paint things as they are before we interpret them and give them meaning, has to go through a lot of hard work. Let me read let me see if I can find it. I'm going to read some. Is that hand up I saw over there? Okay, yeah. Well, like in the beginning of 2001, we're lucky. We've got Kubrick did the phenomenology for us. But I mean, it would have to be a kind of crude and sort of accidental thing, which and maybe it needs help from a monolith. I mean, not in the Heidegger interpretation, but anyway, bit by bit and by accident, people will discover equipment. I mean, of course, most of the time, that's a very special case, the first hammer. I mean, for us, maybe that's why you need a monolith, because that assumes that there was a first time. And the whole Heidegger story is it's always already that way. There weren't any people. There weren't even any humanoids before there was equipment, and then one day the first one discovered the first equipment. I now think 2001 is a bad move, except that at least they know that it would require some other intelligence to do it. But nobody ever has to face that problem, because they don't. As they gradually become human, this is the light dawns gradually over the whole, they will gradually start to use equipment. After all, higher animals already use equipment. And it just goes back until there must be some sort of very minimal sort of equipment, just like there must be some very minimal sort of language. Nobody understands this developmental stuff. But the one thing is sure, that it isn't the way Descartes says. You go ahead if you're looking unhappy. Right. How could they ever get it? Well, I suppose the equipment, let's see if we can go back to 2001, there must have been a lot of equipment already, and we saw that they had shelters anyway that they were in, and I presume they had stuff to drink out of and so forth, and so that there will be, it's the same point again, there would be a very rudimentary equipmental totality from the start. It just wouldn't have very much equipment in it, and there would be very crude equipment. Yeah.
But isn't this where the primordial understanding of the role play, that there's a possibility of projection of possibilities, so that the monkeys or whatever are able to see the state has something. And instrumentally, that's a basic act of Dasein that is capable of projecting the given environment and seeing them in terms of their possibilities for its use.
That sounds like it's too Husserlian already. But I see that they don't see brute facts. In other words, the hammer sort of solicits them to hit something with it. I think you could do it that way. And I think that would be fine. I think, and that must be how it is for the what is kind of animals that drop stones on coconuts to open them and put sticks in holes to get the ants to come out and so forth. How do they do it? Well, they must see this somehow. Without the monolith, they see the stick and they see the ants, and they one day see the ants climbing up the stick, and then they maybe push it a little nearer the anthill, and gradually they get it. And when they get it, they pass it on, and all that kind of. A monkey now uses sticks to get ants out of anthills. So it doesn't. So I don't think it needs Dasein. I'm saying to you, at least I don't know what Heidegger thinks, But I think what Wittgenstein thinks is more what I'm saying, that you just gradually do it, and we don't know how to explain that. But the one thing we don't want to do is, let me put a Wittgenstein-like spin on it, you don't want to invent some mental special capacity that we have to take the first brute fact and see it as the first equipment. That's already what I would call the myth of the mental. There's too much mental in there. Yeah. And then you, after him. Okay, go ahead.
Because the way I understand giving is that, for example, you look back on Ryan Fulber and you see rocks that use currency. Instead of look, use this currency and I thought it was currency. What do you thought of all of this? So that's like they're responsible for currency. That's always the thing they give it. When you're talking about discovery, you really refer to a more introspective, qualitative aspect of time. What to again, I don't think that giving value, certainly, but I think that giving is discovery.
I think you're right. I think you're on an important track, and I was going to say something about it in a minute. So let me see if I can say it yet. See, when I said that Searle makes a mistake in saying that we give the acoustic blast meaning, I think he's cutting across the distinctions you want to make. There's certainly a perfectly sensible, logical question. What does it take? What do you have to add to a bare fact for it to be meaningful? What do you have to add to a piece of cellulose for it to be a dollar bill? And we can give a logical analysis of that. We don't want to mix that up with a psychological claim that somebody anywhere, anytime, ever gave a piece of cellulose the first meaning, money. And I think that's the right way to think about it. There are three ways to think about it. And that is how the world, which is physics tells us it's brute facts, has meaning. One is to do what Searle and Husserl could be doing, some kind of logical analysis. What is added to brute facts that make, and when they become meaningful, and that Heidegger could go along with. The next would be a kind of neuroscience. How does the brute fact how does this acoustic blast, which actually does come out of this orifice and hit you guys, get changed into meaningless discourse? Meaningful discourse, I hope. The answer is going to be tough, and nobody's got it yet, but the neuroscientists are working away at it, and maybe they'll understand that someday. That's a perfectly sensible question. That's all on the level of physics. How these blasts hitting this piece of matter up here finally make this whole organism behave in some kind of way that some scientists can describe. Okay, so it's only a mistake if you think that you can find you are actually describing an activity of a subject or a transcendental ego, or that's what I meant by the myth of the mental, which is doing something to give meaning to brute facts. And I think we're agreeing, aren't we, that you can do the logical analysis without the developmental psychological claims, the constitutional claims. You see, they're very fancy words for this. We constitute it as a hammer. That could be all right. That could be that it's part of a referential whole in which there are hammers, but it could be a bad thing that we have intentional content which enables us to stick the function hammer onto this as an activity. That seems wrong. You want to say something? Wait, you had a priority. Go ahead.
Thinking of like the referential whole that theory has that would make a thing like a hammer-like thing, if it was like replaced in workshop. Go back to the primordial study, see how maybe our hands kind of, we thought analogous to a rock that was used for strength. And so you didn't have to be like the neutral rock that was completely kind of already was involved in the reference whole that wasn't quite like your hand. Like it works better, but
well, that's okay. That's part of the story, and I think that's all right. you could also, it wouldn't be Heidegger-like, say, given the kind of bodies we have, we've already got a lot of solicitations that keep us balanced in the gravitational field and moving forward rather than backward and so forth, which is already making a meaningful spatiality of what is not anymore just Newtonian space. And we've got a here and a now from this always with us, so we don't, and so forth. So insofar as we are already going around like human beings, the world is always already full of order, and it just gets more and more so. Wait, now I have somebody over here. Yeah. Ah, you. Okay, then you. Okay, go ahead. That's all right.
Yes, along the same lines of the tools as being extensions of our bodies. And that idea that we're sort of enhancing our already present qualities. Perhaps in that sense, there doesn't really need to be an origin point. Because if we consider ourselves to be equipment in that sense, like that our capabilities are already we're already soliciting things. Right?
Okay.
We're able to project already. That wouldn't be very Heideggerian.
You're right. You're reading my mind. Exactly what I'm thinking as I listen to you. From a Heidegger point of view, that's existentiel. But from a Merleau-Ponty, that's the conditions of existence, which he wants to talk about, of having a world. So, yeah, but Heidegger wants to talk about it only sort of in this very abstract but important level, that without even bringing in the body, because he isn't going to bring in the developmental story. He's just going to say, but look, the world isn't constructed out of, let's try it this way, the ontology that thinks you somehow have to explain how a world, a meaningful world, could be constructed out of subjects with their intentional content in them and brute facts somehow getting together, either developmentally or even logically, probably. If you think that's the problem, then you've already got something wrong without having to go to Merleau-Ponty and the body in existentiel. So Heidegger's going to do it all on the level of just the Cartesian ontology won't work. And you want to say something?
I feel like there are a lot of examples where we explicitly assign a meaning.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, but the. Good. Okay. So you got it half right. Nothing you said was wrong. It's just that one of the first half is not supposed to be very illuminating. Of course, you can find in other cultures equipment and try to figure out what it was, or you can find weird things and give them a use and so forth. Heidegger would always say, yeah, but that's all. Now comes the part, and Heidegger would say that's all in the background of a whole world of already interrelated equipment that you can fit the frisbee in it. And then comes the part that you said right, and then when we do, then the frisbee pretty soon becomes part of the background. That's the Heidegger point, and just adds to the referential whole, which is always there in the solicitation of every time you see a frisbee coming by, you want to reach out and grab it, and so forth. Good. That's fine. Now, one more question. Yeah.
Why? I mean, 2 or 3 year old playing. They're manipulating the world, not just some functionality. On themselves, a 2-year-old, something like that. No intentionality there, but there's a discovery that an interrelation.
Okay. Well. Okay. I buy everything you say except something about your vocabulary, which we have to fix. Intentionality becomes ambiguous in this course because Heidegger's got a distinction, remember, between primordial intentionality, which is coping, is transparent coping, which is what you're talking about, that children have a lot of, and the kind of intentionality that Searle and Husserl are interested in, which has a mental content related to an external, inner mental content related to an external world. That's later. But by the way, just in case you think that I'm sort of beating on Searle and Husserl, and it's not Heidegger's problem. There are two places where that. Oh, I've gotten way off in the wrong part of the book here. Well, why don't I just catch up with us, and we'll find. I know we'll find what I'm looking for. So on 199, we see. Yeah, good. Just where I want. We make no advanced restriction upon the concept of meaning. He's now introducing his notion of meaning. If that's going to be, I better back up just for a second and say that what's happening is Husserl's got a big deal place for meaning, or Sinn in German. And so people who think like Searle have a big place in lots of analytic philosophers for intentional content, which is another way of talking about meaning. And Heidegger's going to have his own way of talking about meaning, in which he's going to try to take away the term and the function that meaning is supposed to have, and give it a new function and call that meaning. One way to think of it, just to help, that meaning is this inner something that minds have in the Cartesian tradition. And Heidegger's going to make meaning the most general characteristic of the shared external world. That it's another name for the referential totality, and when Heidegger takes it over. But now let's look at the top of 199. No, that's not what I want. That's the second thing I want. Before that already, on 190. I just wanted, this is just getting you into meaning, and then I'll go to the intentional content. On 190, he says, no, I don't. No, we've already read that. Well, okay, I'm ready to go back to where I was, which is I'm catching up with myself to make sure that I've read to you what I wanted to read, and then I will go on. Yeah, okay. Now I'm ready to go on, and that means the top of where I had it beforehand. Now I don't know where it is. Oh dear. Well, I'll find it. I said I was going to find where he distinguishes. Here we are, top of 199. Right at the top, middle of 156. We make no advanced restriction on the concept of meaning, which would confine it to signifying the content of a judgment. That's this inner intentional content-ish thing that he's getting from Husserl. But we understand it as the existential phenomenon already characterized, in which the formal framework of what can be disclosed in understanding and articulated in interpretation becomes visible. In other words, meaning is the referential totality in the background. And that's what he wants to talk about. And he doesn't want to he thinks beg the question and say, well, wherever meaning comes from, it must ultimately come from to talk like Searle, intrinsic intentionality of human individual minds. Yeah.
I guess in reaction to that, maybe, and to go back to the open Brittany example, and maybe the appeal of what regarding this, I feel a certain kind of unease, and I think the source of it may be the sense that there are just too many possibilities, like supposed to be already present. I guess the idea that, say, if you're coming to do a game and you want to improvise, you're making surroundings or whatever, and you think, oh, well, I'm just going to take this random object and I'm going to make it something else. And then the response, I guess, being, well, yeah, but that possibility was already present within your system.
Right. On the background, on the background of the system, there was a place where you could fit it in. Not that there was sort of a place that specifically said Frisbee or something, but if you have things that you can throw, then finally there is also no surprise that you find some new things that you can throw. You're getting existential again. At least you know that, but it doesn't. But whenever you're having an existential thought, leave it. Don't say it for a while. Yeah.
It's difficult to see in cases of complex tools how something in the world could have already been ready to hand. For example, it seems like being able to know the properties of things as present at hand is a condition.
I think that's right. Or making them. Why not?
We don't see like matter. Well, create a micro.
No. Sure, you can do that. I mean, I don't understand why this bothers everybody, but I don't want to spend much time on it. Wait a minute. You can deal with within the whole, on the background of the referential totality, which has got already meaningful space, meaningful time, meaningful equipment. You can always look at things as present at hand and engineer a new piece of equipment, and like a chip. And that requires getting into a completely detached scientific understanding and knowing, all the things that engineers and physicists know about chips. But that doesn't bother Heidegger. It's when you make the general move that all meaning finally goes back to the intentionality of individual subjects, which then become collective intentionality, which then give meaning to shared objects. That whole story it is not going to be refuted by saying, and sometimes we can find meaningless things and give them meaning. That's important. Yeah.
Semester with next West, she talked a lot about this, and one of the things she does to clarify this whole meaning problem is that she notes that he says the word then.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, unhelpful. Shame on Nancy. She's a PhD of mine, but I am outraged. I mean, that is no help at all. I mean, as a sort of mnemonic device, but it doesn't explain anything. Anyway, and Heidegger's Zen has two ends. That's with equal meaning. Anyway, if that's helpful, if it helps you remember it or something, then good for her. I hope she's not listening to this podcast. But anyway, where were we? I got to go back to my numbers here because there's all kinds of things I want you to know about. So he's not doing the Husserl-Searle mental content story. Meaning turns out to be a characteristic of familiarity or significance, as he says on 192, I guess. Let's look. And I say, I could read you something. I don't see what I want to read you. That's not good. 192. Surely that's not what I mean. Maybe I mean 199. That's much more promising. Yes, the one I just read is part of it. And now, looking further, somehow it's as if all of a sudden my notes are about some different book. Give me time to figure this out. Why is that? 192. What happens in 192? Well, the as structure, the referential whole. I got it wrong. It's 193 that I'm trying to talk about. And 193 at the top of the page is, these are the basic definitions of meaning, the way Heidegger wants to take it away, so to speak, from this mental content. Meaning is that wherein the intelligibility of something maintains itself. That which can be articulated in a disclosure by which we understand we call meaning. Well, all of this is just keep thinking referential totality, background familiarity. That's the wherein, or the upon which, of the intelligibility. The concept of meaning embraces the formal existential framework of what necessarily belongs to that which an understanding interpretation articulates. Meaning is on the basis of which, remember, always fix that, of a projection, that's fine, in terms of which something becomes intelligible as something. And I don't want to talk right now about having foresight and so forth. We'll get to that. But anyway, and a little further down, important, meaning is an existentiale of Dasein, not a property attaching to entities, lying behind them, or floating somewhere in an indeterminate domain. I mean, for Husserl, he's a kind of Platonist. Meanings are in some kind of eternal in some way and not part of the everyday world. Heidegger wants to say meaning is a characteristic of the everyday world and the referential totality, and sort of take it over and make it part of his view of things. And it's the background. I want to read that too. Where is it? Okay, that some strange phenomenon. Suddenly my book doesn't seem to correspond to my notes. I don't understand that. Let me look a little longer. So it's the background. Do you see anything about the background on 193? It's sort of there implicitly all the time, but I thought I had a reference where he says it is explicitly not there. Well, I just have to make a question. Let's try. Okay. And so meaning turns out to be not mental, not inner. It's the most public and the most outer phenomenon there is. We're all in it because it is this referential whole. It is the world. It is familiarity. So and now, I don't know why, but I'm going to go to 207. It seems to be something I already said. Oh yeah, here's Husserl on 207. A little skipping ahead of where you were supposed to be, because you were supposed to read starting at 203 for next week. But it's the answer to the acoustic blast. Exactly Heidegger saying there isn't any acoustic blast. Only here he's talking about other noises. The middle of 207. When we are explicitly hearing the discourse of another, we approximately understand what is said, or to put it exactly, we are already with him and advance alongside the entity which the discourse is about. Well, this is not the quote I expected, but it's a good one. On the other hand, what we approximately hear is not what is expressed in the utterance. That is, what we hear, I take it, is something. What we hear is not what is expressed in the utterance. Let me go on. Even in cases where the speech is indistinct or in a foreign language, what we approximately hear is unintelligible words and not a multiplicity of tone data. I bet that what is expressed in the utterance has to be noises. Though that's very odd. I got to check the German. We're on page 164, about a third of the page down. I'm going to read it. What we approximately hear is not noises. Even in cases where the speech is indistinct or in a foreign language, we approximately hear is unintelligible words and not a multiplicity of tone data. That's the acoustic blast. But the other place I was looking for is where he talks about the motorcycle. Oh, it's above that, on 207, right below 164. He says it requires, and this is about the painters and so forth. It requires a very artificial and complicated frame of mind to hear a pure noise. And so babies aren't going to go around hearing pure noises and giving them meaning. It takes a special. They are already hearing their mother's voice in the womb. Their sounds are meaningful before the baby's even got a mind. So it's artificial to hear a pure noise. But once you've got a mind and you're trained, like a painter, or in this case, I guess a sound engineer, you can train yourself to hear pure sounds. They're there. Physics isn't wrong. The fact that motorcycles and wagons are what we proximally hear is the phenomenal evidence that in every case, Dasein as being in the world already dwells amongst what is ready to hand within the world. It doesn't dwell proximally alongside sensations, and it doesn't give meaning to these sensations. And okay, that's just backing up what I said earlier. Here's the quote from Searle. I put it in quotes so I won't get it wrong. The child learns to treat the sounds that come out of her own and others' mouths as standing for or meaning something. And the answer is supposed to be, you don't have to learn to treat the sounds coming out of the people's mouths as meaning something. What you do have to learn is what specific meaning specific sounds have. That's learning a language. You have to learn English or whatever language you start with, and then you can learn French and German. But learning to hear what comes out of people's mouths as anything other than meaningful something or other, it requires a very special training, and then you can hear acoustic blasts. That's the Heidegger way. And as he said rightly, Heidegger, Husserl and Husserl should never have gotten into this. I'm not even sure that Husserl does. But it's not a question of what the child learns. It's a question of some kind of analysis. You can analyze what comes out of people's mouths into acoustic blasts. People who do phonetics have to do that. And that's fine. And you can ask what gets added to this noise in order to make it meaningful. That's fine, but you better be careful at that point, because Heidegger wants to say, don't go back into the ontology that says, well, if there are these brute facts, then there must be something in minds, namely intentional content, that gives the meaning. That's beginning to ask, where does the meaning come from? Then you get the myth of the mental. You can ask sort of what is, this is what Heidegger's asking. What do you have to add to brute facts to get meaning? The answer for him is a referential totality. That's not a developmental claim, and it's not an ontological claim about the independence of subjects and objects. It's Heidegger's phenomenological claim that your basic ontology had better just start with the meaningful world. And, okay, we've done it twice, in fact, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Let me see now. Okay, we got a whole new subject in 10 minutes. Unless anybody has anything they want to say, I'm going on with something I thought I was going to finish today, but it's at least fun to start it. Okay, the next, that's the story on meaning, and the way Heidegger tries to take it over. Now comes the derivation of logic. That's interesting and important, and that's when he starts going on 195 to assertion as a derivative mode of interpretation. First I want to sort of tell you what's at stake. I mean, he's going to try to show the way you can get to the propositions and formal structures that logic deals with by leaving out more and more of the everyday meaning that we have in our ordinary use of language. And why is that important? Well, it's really important, or was, I think, a lot more important than it is now. It was important because when people believed in good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, which was in the 60s and 70s, that meant they were going to use the predicate calculus to represent all intelligibility, so that computers could take in acoustic blasts, turn them into propositions, calculate. Well, never mind that part. They could never manage that part. But they wanted at least that computers could be, say, given a story, and then ask questions about it. And that was supposed to check the computer's understanding of the story. And that turned out to be extremely hard, because without them realizing it, the whole background was already in there, in understanding even the simplest children's story. Let's see if I can quickly get an example. There was they had this example which they never could solve at the beginning of the 70s when I was teaching at MIT, and they were trying to do artificial intelligence this way. They were trying to get something like the intelligence of a 3 or 4-year-old into the computer. And it was given the story. It was Jack's birthday. Mary was going to go to Jack's. I'll bring him a cookie, said Mary. No, he's already got one. No, not a cookie. It'll have to be a toy, a toy soldier or something. And the other girl says, no, he's already got one. He'll make you take it back. And a kid can understand that, apparently, at the age of 3 or 4 or something. But in there is the whole story about why do you not want more than one of these kinds of presents? If it were a cookie, it wouldn't be that if he's already got one, he'll make you take it back. That would be the wrong reaction. But if it's a gyroscope, that might be the right reaction. And then there's the question of, well, how how big does this cookie be? Are you giving him a cookie like that, or a little one? And if so, maybe if he had one this big, he wouldn't want any more. But if he had one this big, he'd like to have more. I'm just making up this. No, this all really happened. But what I'm trying to convey to you is a whole understanding of objects and which ones one wants, and of business and what you can take back and what you can't take back, and even that story doesn't even say that she's going to a birthday party. It just says it was Jack's birthday and Mary was going to Jack's, so that the cookie was a present and that it was a birthday. The kid is supposed to know. And the point of what I'm saying is all that ought to be representable in logic, with x's and with predicates, with properties of objects and so forth, and relations between them, and rules for how to relate them. And people believe, the John McCarthy, who's still there at Stanford, and the founder of AI, who named AI, still thinks that it must be the case that all intelligibility can be represented in predicate calculus with a few little corrections that he's put in. And the reason he thinks it is sort of, what else could it be? That's the structure of intelligibility, isn't it? Logic. Anything that's intelligible, we ought to be able to represent it in logic. And so the question, but if you see with Heidegger how logic is derived by leaving out more and more of the intelligibility of the world, you wouldn't be inclined to think that the residue would still get you the richness of the world and its intelligibility. I'll get next time to two places where Heidegger says this explicitly, but I didn't put them in the lecture, I realize now. So that's one of the reasons why we should care about Heidegger's kind of derivation of logic. That is, to show how it is that we get from everyday intelligibility to understanding formal structures. And the other thing he's trying to do at the same time is derive a conceptual understanding, and how conceptual understanding grows out of a richer kind of understanding that can't be captured with concepts. And so he's doing both of these things at once and in a big hurry. But it's interesting because if you see that, you might be able to do it better. Somebody else could do a more detailed, interesting, more worked out version of this. So let me see if I can. What he wants to show that how we get from primordial coping to our experience of objects with properties that minds can represent, and he wants to do it without sort of helping himself to self-sufficient mental intentional content. He wants to, in effect, say, and he will, I'll read it in a minute, that trying to explain it in terms of the fact that we've already got meaning in our minds and concepts and so forth, it makes it too easy. He thinks that that's just mysterious to bring in mental meanings to explain what's going on. He wants to try to say how we ever got to have mental meanings when we originally had this everyday meaningful world and our mind was just an empty openness to it. So he's got lots of problems and interesting ones. What you want to finally understand is how we can believe that there's some subject or substance S with the property P, and what you'd have to leave out and how you would go step by step to get there. So he starts by starting, with assertions, and he's going to analyze assertions to see if what they are and what they do, and to what extent logic captures what they are and what they do. On 196, back to the head, it's about how the as structure gets modified when it becomes a formal structure. And so he says at the top of 196, for one thing, it can be demonstrated. What can be demonstrated? Well, you better begin back here on 195 at the bottom. All interpretation with section 33, which is what I'm talking about. I'm just barely able to set it up, and then we'll do it next time. But let's finish setting it up. All interpretation is grounded on understanding. That's what's been articulated as such in interpretation and sketched out beforehand in the understanding in general. Something articulable is the meaning. And now that's we done. Insofar as assertion is grounded on understanding and presents us with a derivative form in which an interpretation has been carried out, it too has meaning. Yet this meaning can't be defined as something which occurs in a judgment. He's back again about intentional content. In our present context, we should give an explicit analysis of assertion, and then the analysis will serve several purposes. And let me just give you a feel for it, so when you read it, I'll blurt out what's going on. He's going to go through something that we've already seen once. Keep in mind the hammer. That first there is transparent hammering. Then if there's something that goes wrong, there is the hammer as too heavy. And that's completely situational. Formal logic's not going to be able to get that, he's going to say. And then you can de-whirl it and get to the hammer has weight, which is not situational. And finally you can get to the theory of this and get to the hammer has math. Remember, that's what, 412? Keep your eye on 412 as you read 196 and 197. It's clearer on 412. But that's what a kind of derivation he has in mind, is to go from coping to contextual noticing to decontextual seeing the properties of things, like having a certain weight, weighing 5 pounds, to theory. Remember 412. And then you will understand what's going on when you read the bottom of 196 and all of 197, and you will see how he's going to come out in the end. And the hammer stuff comes back on 200. That's where if you look at 200 and 412, you'll see his moves. And I think that's it. We will go over that next time, but we're also going on now to Discourse, which is on 203, because that's not going to take more than 15 minutes. Okay.